guys, it's Elena and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about something that I am so extremely passionate about. Today we are going to be talking about signs that I knew that I was on the spectrum. Just little clues, little things that just made me feel different, things that my mum saw. Maybe you have not been diagnosed but you're sitting there thinking, you know, I feel really different, I don't know what it is. Maybe this video can help bring you a little bit more clarity. My hope with this video is ultimately to remove some of the stigma surrounding being on the spectrum. I know when I've told people in the past, like, I'm on the spectrum, their responses are always like, oh, you don't seem like you are. And because they can't see it, therefore it doesn't exist, and I would like to kind of remove some of that stigma. So if you're wanting to know a little bit about my experience of being diagnosed, how that came to be, I will leave a link to the video down below. You may want to watch that before you watch this if you are kind of deep diving into all things on the spectrum. But these are just signs, these are just little clues that I noticed, my mum noticed, my therapist noticed, and ultimately led to a diagnosis. The first thing that I would like to point out is when people say, oh, you don't look on the spectrum. I feel like that is really tough because I think people feel like when you say you're on the spectrum, they think they should be able to see it. But for someone like me, I will never show that something is kind of wrong. I will never show that I'm having a tough time reading your facial expressions. I will never let you know just the things that I'm struggling with. I think as well, I'm a female. Females tend to get diagnosed a lot later on in their life because they're so good at masking it, and that was no different for me. I was so good at masking, I'm still so good at masking, and as soon as I walk out that front door, I held myself together. From the moment that I went to kindergarten, the moment that I was around people my own age, I knew that I had to put on this front. And I don't know why I felt that, but I just knew that I had to hold myself together. Another big sign was I felt like as soon as I started school, I felt this me versus them mentality. There was this difference, me versus them. I don't connect with you. There is something separate between us, and that was apparent. I can remember like the day I started school and that feeling of I don't relate to these people. Even when I had friends, that still never seemed to go away. I still felt some distance there, and that was always quite a hard thing. I just always thought, you know, oh, my family are the ones that I feel the most connected with, but no one else. And it's only been till recently that I've realised why that is. Another clear sign from my mum was I needed routines, and those routines have stuck until now. I am a person who needs a certain routine. I've talked about it in my previous video, but even when I was learning to walk, there was a routine in which my mind would take me through the safest way to walk. And once I knew that I could get from here to there safely, my mind wouldn't let me think, oh, you could go another way. It would just think, well, we know that we can get here to there, and that's a safe point. But over here, we don't need to be thinking about that. So that's what would happen. I wouldn't think about just other ways to do things. And that's still to this day. You know, I go out and I go for a walk, and I'm living in this new house and this new neighborhood, and I will find one pathway and I stick to that pathway the entire time for weeks and weeks and weeks because I know that's safety. I can visualize it in my head, and that just brings me a lot more peace as opposed to just going off and exploring. Like, I personally don't know how to do that. So I think routine, if you get stuck with routine, if a change of plans or a change of routine really throws you off, that may be like an indication you may be on the spectrum. I think as well, something to note is I find it very hard to move on from childhood things because childhood was a safe place for me. And what I find is I try and hold the same energy that I had, say, as a child at Christmas. I try and bring that same energy into my adult life. And of course, nothing ever stays the same. Your Christmases are going to look very different from when you're 5 years of age to, say, 25 years of age. And what I find is I like lose it when it doesn't have that same feeling. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. Christmas should always have the same feeling because that was a safe feeling, and now because I don't have that feeling, it doesn't feel safe. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like my brain is just... I think another sign was I always felt this difference between me and every one of my peers, whether that be friendships, whether that be teachers, whether that be just acquaintances at school. I always felt this difference, and I always felt like no one can actually get to know me. Even if they know me, even if they're my friend, I still feel like there is this aspect that they will never see, and still I would mask. Even if I was myself with them, there would still be this element of masking. And I think like my entire life, all I've done is say to my mum how different I felt, how tough it feels to live in my brain. It has always felt so difficult to live in my brain because living in general can be so complicated, needing routines, needing specific things to be a certain way, textures. That was another thing. Certain washed fabrics, when they were like crispy and clean, like you can see the reaction that I'm having to it right now. It's very, very apparent. When I took the test for sensory overload, I was at the top for sensory overload. So noises especially is the quickest way to shut me down and lose focus of what is happening around me. Having people too close to me. If say I was sitting on the bus and I'm sitting next to someone, I would make sure like I'm as small as I can be, like trapped in the corner, so that no part of us touches. That's all I would focus on. It's just zeroing in on like, oh my god, you're right next to me and I feel this energy. And it was exhausting. This energy, I could just feel the energy of these people because I would be so like over analyzing everything, everyone, to keep myself as safe as I could, basically. Things like intimacy, driving, socializing, those are all things that I struggle with. Partying, I don't drink, I don't do drugs. I feel like, again, that's a routine that I never got into. So the routine is not drinking or doing drugs. I find that as a 25-year-old female, people find it odd that I don't kind of partake in the regular kind of things that my age group does. And that's quite difficult. It adds to the loneliness that much more. I feel like I have a very, very intelligent brain, and I feel that it is just exhausted by people. People are the most challenging aspect in my life, and that may be perhaps why I do YouTube for a job. That may be why I live by myself, I do things in a particular way that a lot of people kind of don't understand. I'm in this point of my life right now where I'm trying to accept that. I'm trying to accept me. Things like opening my hands and using my hands to talk. Accepting that is just a part of being on the spectrum. Realizing that reading people's facial expressions is something that I struggle with. Black and white thinking, just little routines such as needing to shower before I eat food. I think the last final thing that people around me, people closest to me could note is my obsessions with things. So when I like something, it's either 100% or 0%. There's no kind of in between. And so when I like something, I have to know everything about it. I have to learn it inside and out. And that is very much relative to those on the spectrum. I think those are some of the main points, I guess, that I experience. Maybe you won't actually see them. But I think what is important to note here is just because you may be on the spectrum doesn't mean your life is over. It doesn't mean you're any different or any less than anyone else. What I've come to realize is when I got that diagnosis that yes, you are on the spectrum, yes, you have Asperger's, I realized that, wow, I have a different brain to everybody else around me. And there's something really special in that, no one thinks quite like how I do. And even though once in my life I looked at that as like lonely feeling, now I look at it as my little superpower. My encouragement to you guys is don't give up hope if you feel like life is very, very challenging. I think especially if you are young, it's okay to want to do things differently to maybe everybody else around you. It's okay to live the life that you want to live, whether that's inside where you feel safe or whether it's outdoors by yourself, it doesn't really matter. I think it's important to know is as long as you're happy, that's what matters. And as long as you feel that you are getting the most out of life, I think that's all that matters. If you guys have any questions surrounding my Asperger's, or maybe you want me to answer some questions that you've got, please feel free to leave a comment down below, or be sure to follow me on my social medias. I will love to chat, and I love you guys so much, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye. Mwah.